Hey neighbors, the handyman here with Initiative Coffee Company. The Bill Allen here with Bill Allen World and the Bill Allen. It's time to rise and roll.
Rise and ra-ho, ho, 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 ho!
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, we're not going to do this again before Christmas.
That's it, buddy.
That's the way to go.
Welcome to the show. This is the last show before fa la 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 Christmas.
Well, before January.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some bits of December after Christmas, too.
Yeah, true. So it's Monday, the 17th of December. And you know, it's actually, Brian, it's not that cold in Chicago.
It's not.
It's been
very mild, in fact.
Pretty mild. I don't know if we're going to have a white Christmas. I'm kind of okay with that. I'm hoping to spend Christmas.
I'll have a white Christmas regardless. We'll be in Minnesota.
Because you're going up to the great white north.
The great-ish, white-ish, north-ish. We're not going all the way to Canada.
That's true. So, Brian, we've got a high-octane show. I don't think I've ever used that phrase before, people.
Either.
So put on your diapers, strap into your seatbelts, and get ready. Because
That's good, because I'm tired.
Yeah, well, this is going to be a little bit of a high-octane show because we only have one Kickstarter, and then we're going straight into a series of Tabletopics. So if you're joining us live on Twitch, check out the chat. I posted a link to this Kickstarter, and we're going to debate it and discuss it. Now, some of you people who might know about it, this is actually a Kickstarter called Silent Titans. It's an adventure for Old School D&D by Patrick Stuart.
That Patrick Stuart?
No.
Oh.
And I'm wondering, but see, this is what I want to talk about. Using Chris McDowell's Into the Odd rule set. So we need to discover who Chris McDowell is, and we need to discover what the odd rule set is. Now, Dave, there's no video, so we don't have to worry about audio, but you can cut over to the screen right quick. And what we'll see here, I usually don't share my desktop, but people see, look, there it is, hiding behind the window, the D&D logo. So what we have here, Brian, is Jacob Hurst is the person running this, and it's an old school D&D by Patrick Stuart. Who is Chris McDowell? Using the odd rule set. I like the art. It's very abstract and kind of borderline trippy. Let's take a look at the numbers. The goal was 6,500. They have 43,000. That's going to be an audio spike. I should have looked away when I said that. That was 43,000. See how I did that?
Yeah.
725 backers and 18 days left to go. So people, if you're down with this old school renaissance, let's look at this a little bit more. This is Silent Titans. It's been a while coming. Since they don't have a video, Brian, I'm doing the video voice.
The video voice?
Yep. What is it? Silent Titans is an adventure for tabletop role-playing games written by Patrick Stuart, writer of Veins of the Earth, Deep Carbon Observatory, Fire on the Velvet Horizon, and a few other things. Laid out by Christian Kessler, who did layout for Fever Swamp, the award-winning book for Melsonian Arts Council, and with art by Dirk Leichte of Troika, Codex Zine, and Slade Stoller's Dust Fog and Glowing Embers. A so far unacknowledged near genius we were lucky to stumble into. First of all, I just want to say, Dave, that you should never, Brian, end a sentence with a preposition. So ending on into.
Those hard and fast rules are not valid anymore.
You know,
language is evolving.
Language is evolving, that's fine. But, you know, I'm still going to be judgmental.
That's fair.
I'm that guy.
Language is evolving, but you're not.
So let's see what this, because that's a bunch of...
so Danny says that Chris McDowell is a geographer.
Oh, God, thank you, Danny. This is why we need Danny to be our... Danny's like our have you ever noticed this? Danny's basically like the silent guest on the show. Danny, you know what? I'm feeling like maybe going into 2019, we're going to give you like an associate producer credit, just because like you're... When we don't know the nerd things, you're that person who knows the nerd things. So thank you, Danny.
She's at her computer, like, hacking, like, typing away.
We need that.
Or
she's like the mod.
If she knows all this stuff off the top of her head, it's bonkers.
But she's like our mod. So thank you, Danny. So tell more.
Apparently he's a geographer that creates some insane tabletop maps, and she linked his Patreon. So
that looks pretty insane.
Yeah.
That map looks like a
Vaguely
Salvador
like
Dali... MC
This looks
Escher.
like, what's the Invisible World type thing?
Yeah,
Look at that.
Invisible Sun. We could
Invisible
steal
Sun.
that
Yeah.
for Danny's. All right. Werheel itself is a time-lost peninsula built on the tangled and comatose bodies of world-destroying transdimensional titans and suffering under a curse which slowly reduces its inhabitants to the status of wild woodwoes. Woodwoes.
Wood woes. Oh, no.
All right, you know what? So, Brian, so far, just immediate, kind of opinion. I'm reading this, and it's a lot of original stuff. Notice how the words elf, dwarf, none of that have come up. Like the traditional
Wood woes
tropes.
is a monster
Damn it, Brian.
in 5th Ed.
Okay.
know
On top
about
of that,
other
what
systems.
government does exist is arguably not the finest, being dominated by an obese, cunning, and rapacious feudal lord obsessed with extracting taxes and keeping out the kingdom's near mythical enemies. The player characters fall through reality under mysterious circumstances. Trademark. What? That's not possible. And end up in Werheel, the plug hole of the metaverse.
Maybe it is possible. Maybe
Their
it's like
only
a
real
title.
problems are that they are lost in time, cut off from the rest of reality, dirt poor, and that the Titans themselves are waking up and going to the end of the world. As well as that, they have pissed off an evil pig. To prevail and escape Werheel, they must brave its nightmare-haunted, shifting realities, find ways beneath the land, break into the Titans' sleeping minds, and steal their golden thoughts. This will put the Titans back to sleep, shift the realities back to something more... You know what, Brian?
This
That-
sounds cool.
It does sound cool, and that art does sound like look like Invisible Sun stuff. And I'm gonna go ahead and say that even if this wasn't a D&D campaign, I'm feeling like if you had this material, you could mod it
Right.
into something in Invisible Sun, into something
Right.
for more abstract role playing.
And this is something that we've kind of been talking about since the beginning of the show, right? Like this notion that system doesn't matter, right?
Yes.
So I think that there's a lot of opportunity here to we talked about kit bashing last week, but to bring this into different systems and look at it from different perspectives.
Yeah.
I think this is cool. This sounds cool. There's an evil pig involved.
So now we need to know more about the odd rule set. So what about the rules, though? The rules are based on the first edition of Chris McDowall's Into the Odd rule set. Character generation is integrated into the adventure and game. Players are given specific named characters to play, though a lot is left open to their interpretation. The opening adventure is a classic in media res Patrick style opening, which brings the players directly into the first dungeon and gives them stuff to do right away. Okay, so the book. It will be nice. That looks cool.
It does.
So, Brian, here's my feeling about this.
Yes.
The more we look at this, the more I feel like this attunes to the kind of people who want a little bit more of the, abstract, surrealist, whatever you call it, kind of more cerebral role-playing game experience. This doesn't look like a hack and slash kind of situation. It definitely looks like something that would remind me of the Monty Cook vibes.
Yeah.
But I'm also picking up, just through the artwork and kind of the strangeness and oddity of this, I'm picking up a little bit of that Zach Smith Lamentations of the Flame Princess
Okay.
and Blue Medusa
Yeah.
vibe. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where the art itself
Is part of the
inspires
game.
so much of the game.
That's
which
fair.
I don't, I have no negative things to say about this. It just makes, here's why this popped on the radar. So it was a thing that I was looking at, and the maps, and the surrealist arts, and the
everything's
stretch
full
goals,
color,
and everything's full color, right? And then I'm looking. Now this is what drove me back, right? So for $15, you get the digital everything. That's a pretty
pretty good
fair
deal.
price,
Yeah.
man. Now for $50, you get the hardcover. You get a cloth-bound, foil-stamped, ribbon bookmarked, Smith-sewn hardcover copy of Silent Titans and all digital rewards. $50 is what you'd pay for what? Your average D&D book.
Yeah.
Okay? So just price-wise, for something that seems very kind of different from the norm, you're getting quite a good deal.
Yeah. Also, $15 relative to other PDFs is dirt cheap. You look at you go to the D&D Beyond pack.
Yeah.
For a hard book, and you're probably paying $20 to $30.
Okay. So now here's an interesting thing, Brian. Remember that when we were looking at this, they had 725 backers. Okay. At the maximum level of $70, they had a limit of 500 backers. Right. So 500 of the 725 were people who spent $70 to get this stuff. The book, the PDF and digital bonus content. The first stretch goal will be upgraded to include physical versions of the characters, cartograms, and Fool's Cap errata. Reward no longer available. So 500 people right off the bat hit that. Now, doing the math, that right there at $70 is would have exceeded their goal was only 6,500. So they made 35 grand just from
their highest tier.
From the highest tier, and everything else is gravy. I mean, that's gravy. So it goes back to, like, remember how we were kind of looking critically at some of the Kickstarters where they set like impossibly high goals?
Unrealistic.
Like, this is not only an interesting product, but it seems to me like a very effective strategy in terms of their Kickstarter, and they don't even have a video.
Yeah.
It's blowing my mind.
Well, it's not. My guess is.
I don't know. I mean,
my
that's
guess
it's really
the creator here has some name recognition, right?
Yeah. Oh no, lag. We are lagged.
Yeah.
Dave, what's going on with the lag, buddy? Danny says, because of how heavily supported his Patreon is, I bet that his patrons not only supported for physical copies and such, they probably gave a little extra change to be nice. Yeah. Yeah. All right, we've come out of the lag.
$70 per post on Patreon. That's huge.
Yeah, that is pretty massive. So the last thing I wanted to touch on is the fact that, which we've talked about repeatedly, is that a lot of this comes down to the personality. So this is a known entity, right? It's multiple known entities, right? You've got Patrick Stuart, this Patrick Stuart person involved, using Chris McDowall's Into the Odd rule set. So that following, maybe built-in following, and the fact that that's been teased out seems to indicate that this was going to happen.
And this might just be how they release content, right? Like, I see a lot of companies that, like, they only release new content through Kickstarter.
Right.
So maybe that's just the way they do it. But.
And it looks to me like it's been successful from the get-go, and maybe that's just an indicator that they built a demand for it before the launch even happened. You know, the content was there,
Just kind of
they teased it out, primed the pump, exactly. So anyway, it looks interesting. I don't know that I would go in for the full $50 book.
But I might spend $15 on a PDF.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah, especially. And considering that it's something that you could kit bash or what have you. Okay, so that's it for Kickstarter. A lot of the other stuff on Kickstarter was either, one day away from closing out and or things that we covered.
I mean, there's a lot of psychology to Kickstarter, and I think people are kind of at the point in the year where they don't want their Kickstarter to fund December 28th, because then there's like a tax liability they have to deal with before they cut checks.
True. Yeah.
I know that when Matt Colville was starting his Kickstarter, he was going to do it over like October and November, and then reconsidered because he didn't think he could get rid of that much money in the allotted time, which it ended up being a lot more money than he expected. So,
Yeah. So, on to table topics, people.
Table topics.
Table topics.
You have bonus table topics from us today. It's your Christmas present.
Yeah, we have a lot of table topics to discuss. This past weekend was crazy busy for both of us. My table topic leads into that table topic. So do you want to start off with a recap of that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
so Brian went up to Wisconsin.
Yeah, so
Tell us about it, Brian.
Went up to Appleton, Wisconsin this weekend. We worked with, we worked with Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Carlos from Dungeon Rats and Rivals of Waterdeep, and Xander Generate of Geek and Sundry. We shot a little video that's really focused on like growing diversity in tabletop in like not the obvious ways.
So the basic pitch is that Xander is, a pretty well-known person who's from Wisconsin, and the concept was, hey, I'm going to go back home and like visit with
D&D
family
with my mom.
and play D&D with my mom.
Yeah, and it worked out
which is
great.
not a thing that he's done before, though, right?
No.
So the
had never
novelty
played.
is like, imagine like many of us, we grow up playing games, and your mom or dad are like, oh, they're playing that Dungeons and Dragons and Dungeons game,
Right.
and then so now it's kind of like you're grown up, you go back home to visit, you play D&D with the parents, and not just his mom, but like his mom's friends. Who were the parents of his friends growing up who played D&D. So, like, imagine your gaming group's
like
moms.
his mom as his aunt.
It's basically,
then,
instead of,
some
like,
other-
D&D with high school students, it was D&D with moms.
It ended up being like his mom, his aunt, and two ladies they know from the bar. Which
Okay.
is even better. Like,
All right. So,
but it was
and
a
the
blast.
cool thing is that even this little town in
Yeah.
Appleton, Wisconsin, shout out, Rock Garden Studios.
Yeah.
There's
It's
a
like
studio
the studio
facility.
in the Green Bay area.
And it's amazing,
It's
right? And it's
pretty
been around
nice.
for decades, and they like record bands there. It's like a recording studio.
Yeah.
But he also, the guy Mark
Does
there,
video,
has a
yeah.
whole video operation, right? So talk a little bit more about that process.
So I guess he rents cameras rather than like
Yeah, sure.
owning them.
Well,
but
because the primary business is
it's
sound, right?
Yeah. But he's got like a really cool, big space, like studio space, and like just going in his control room alone was astronomical, right?
I'm gonna, for those following along live on the Twitch, I'm gonna post the link so you can look at some of the pictures of this amazing place where you guys got to shoot this.
Yeah, it was
Go
cool.
ahead.
And like it's cool because I got to watch. I mean, I was very interested in the community aspect, right? So I got to
Right.
watch like Xander and his mom get closer in this very like specialized hobby that they have, right? That he has, right? Like it was an interesting thing for me to see him like get to know his mom and like her like get to know what he does with his life.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was really interesting to me. I don't know. I don't know to what degree we've stepped on Wizard's toes at this point, but
Well, I mean, we're not going to give it away, but
Right.
at some point, Wizards of the Coast or Geek and Sundry
May
or
do
someone
something with
may
it or
or may
might
not
not. I
do
don't
something
know.
with this. But, I think just as an interesting thing, the fact that, A, you and Carlos were kind of the producers and directors on this, shoot.
right.
B, like you said, the whole community thing is really cool.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to, how D&D's been around for a long time, and people, it's had an impact. When I went to Gen Con 50, I, had no initial exposure to that whole community other than we were going there on behalf of Black Magic Design to do some video production for Rudy and Satine. And along the way, met a whole bunch of people.
Right.
And it started to occur to me that, this has huge potential for a documentary or a documentary feature or even just a series. And the number one prompt and question that kept coming back to me was, what has D&D done for you?
Right.
Right? Because I think if you ask any gamer, and it doesn't have to just be D&D, it could be what is tabletop
Whatever
role-playing games
system you prefer.
done for you? And I think that answer has such potential to elicit really cool responses. Some of them deep, some of them, smaller, some of them really, really, really personal, like where D&D has like literally helped people to not kill themselves or
Right.
help them to get over their PTSD.
Right.
And in other cases, just like, it's helping me with my verbal skills, or it's helped me explore my art or
social
writing or
anxiety,
social anxiety.
yeah.
Right. And there's so many different things that this game, these games and in turn the communities have provided. So
Yeah.
it's kind of cool that you got to do that. I was not able to go on that because I
You
was
were
on
very busy in your own right.
I was on gaming weekend. Yes. So, my college roommate Chris has been playing D&D with his friends that he grew up with since the '80s. They're not as old school as me, but they've been playing for decades, and probably I want to say 10, maybe 12 years ago now. Gosh, I think it's been up for about 12 years. They started getting together, and I was like the new guy, right? Because they grew up with each other, and I've known Chris, and I knew them through
Right.
Chris. But like I was invited to join their gang. So once a year, we get together for Gaming Weekend, which is basically just a weekend of men who are married and dads, typically, who get together and we play games all day long and all night long, and we eat food and have drinks and merriment, and it's fun. Some of the campaigns, and we rotate who DMs, we rotate campaigns, we've played multiple editions and different games. Some of the campaigns have been going since the 80s. Like, imagine if you were playing in your high school campaign and you had the same characters, and you remorted them into from 3rd edition to 3.5 and 3.5 to 4th and stuff. It was epic. It was fast paced. I got up there, and the guys had already gotten there the night before. They were playing that morning. I got up basically midway through the first full day. Our friend Dan was running the game, which is set in the Forgotten Realms.
Sure.
Everybody.
Is he running Hardbook, or because I know that for a while you're doing like Curse of Strahd.
Right. So he is basically, what they've done with the current campaign is he's basically taken the history that they built when they played their characters in the Forgotten Realms in the 80s and 90s, and now the characters we're playing now are like the next generation. They're the children, in some cases, the children of those heroic characters that they built for 10 years. So their original characters are now the high-level NPCs, which is cool, because honestly, that's kind of what all the OGs did, like Gygax and stuff.
Right.
Incorporated
everything.
Luke Gygax's character Melf was his childhood character that he played when his dad ran games and stuff. So we're kind of doing that, and the only one who doesn't have I'm the son of so and so is me, because I didn't play in their games. So my character is just my character. We're going through, and we're like mid-level, right? Level 5, and going through adventures and encounters, and a lot of it is just old school. We're traveling the trade, like we started out in Waterdeep, we're traveling the tradeway. We have to get all the way across the continent. So this is meant to be, installments, years of stuff. Right. But he's doing a lot of the traditional stuff. You're rolling up random encounters on the road. Okay, you're near forests, I'll roll on this table. So it was a lot of that kind of old school fun where, like, what the hell? We just fought trolls and now we're fighting red caps, and why? But he very cleverly builds into the narrative why these things are happening. So it's not just random encounters. Sure. Okay. Dan has to leave, unfortunately. So Saturday, I take over. I take over the group. I create a little side mission storyline, and they decide to join this group who's going to this dread keep to, dispatch of these evil baddies who have been, haunting the land. I have a whole dungeon mapped out, Brian. Encounters, everything, right? But time's ticking. Gaming weekend is valuable time. We're playing like 12 to 14 hours, a day. We get to a point where I realize, I'm like, there's no way they're going to make it through this entire thing.
Right.
They're like 4 rooms into just the first floor of the dungeon. And there's like 3 more floors. So I come up with this quandary, which is kind of leading into the table topic. How to run a dungeon for mid to high level parties. How to run this dungeon. So here's the 3 things that I considered. Room by room, which is your classic dungeon crawl. You have a map, the party has to go through it. If your gaming session ends, the DM makes a note, here's where you left off.
Largely, if you want to see the most current example of that, you can pick up the new hard book. Right, Dungeon of the Mad Mage is exactly that. Right?
And it's you're going through, and that's a classic dungeon crawl. The second version is the narrative, which is you actually play and roll through some of the rooms, and then you kind of summarize some of the other experiences in the dungeon. So, if there's an area where there's like simple hobgoblin guards and the party's easily able to dispatch that, do you really want to sit at the table for an hour and a half and resolve combat? Or can you say, okay, guys, each spellcaster burn off a spell slot.
Right.
And
that's definitely something that I've done in the past.
Right.
With like,
or maybe
especially like Monday Night AL play, where like we have 4 hours to get through this.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend an hour and a half on 20 cultists, like you use 2 fireballs and they're dead.
Right.
Congratulations.
And maybe it wouldn't have exactly turned out the way, but what you do with narrative, in my impression, is that you kind of figure out like, okay, the challenge rating's there where we could play through this, but is it really important to the overall thing, right? The last is the classic video game version, which is like teleport to end boss, where you figure out that, okay, if the party is full of really strategic players who know how to like, you know, save up their spell slots and they're well equipped and they're smart, and you basically know that they would have defeated this challenge with you and it just eats up time, do you just kind of get them to the last few rooms and then eventually to the end boss? So that's kind of the question that came to mind, because as I was running this, I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't want to skip the entire dungeon. But at the same time, we were literally running out of time.
I mean, I would add one more to that, and that would be skill checks, right? Skill checks are much faster than combat.
Yep.
They're kind of that we've talked about it a couple of times, that 4th edition holdover, where like you can get past this whole floor of the dungeon if you can make these climb checks down 2 floors below. Right? Like, or these athletic checks, or use rope, or however you want to do it.
Right. And I absolutely think that that's another, to me, that falls into the narrative method.
Absolutely.
With some rules. So as a DM, Brian, let's talk about this a little more, because this is kind of the bigger table topic that I really want to explore. How do you do that narrative thing? So how do you play some of the dungeon, but then what do you take from them? What do they have to quote unquote pay to skip through some of the stuff?
And I think that's the problem you run into, right? Is essentially what you're doing is taking away player autonomy. And I think the goal is to do that as little as possible.
Okay.
Right? Like, I think if you give them excuse, like, I think having the out of like a skill check, right? Like, no, dice determine this. Like, I'm not taking away your abilities. Like, we're still using your character's sheet and dice. We're just circumventing part of it. You're being sneaky, you're being stealthy, blah, blah, blah. Versus, like, oh, you walk into a room, there's some goblins there, you kill them, you keep going. There's orcs in the next room, you kill them too. I think that takes away a little bit more of the autonomy of the players, right? Like, they want to go through those motions a lot of times.
Okay.
I think with a lot of groups, like, sure, they're fine with that because they recognize, like, we're short on time, we want to get through this. This room is not essential to the story. And I think, like, as long as you keep that in mind, largely your players will be okay with it. But if you can give, like, mechanical excuses.
Let's think about the mechanical excuses. So probably the top thing that most DMs would count on would be the stealth check. And I agree with that, because if you can just sneak around some potential encounter, great. Let's say that you do that. That's one option. Let's say that the sneak check or the stealth check isn't an option because half of your party's wearing heavy armor and has disadvantage to stealth.
And there are ways around that, though.
Okay, so do you have some athletics checks to climb around things? What's another way that we could do this? Is there a way that people who are more charisma based could do it? Can you bluff or deceive
or persuade your way?
Persuade your way. Right? So maybe that's another way DMs could conceivably, if so, it's not just stealth. I think that's an important thing for new DMs who are trying to grapple with how to run a dungeon so that it's not just this drudge through. But you can, skill checks could give you the stealth option, the athletics, climbing, acrobatics, cartwheeling, parkouring through the rooms. Basically, I almost think, Brian, and kind of be my sounding board. Is it possible for a DM to create a barter system with the players that gives them a choice and say, look, at this point in the dungeon, we could play through each room and that would burn out the rest of the time, or we could kind of skip through the next 3 to 4 rooms if you guys make some skill checks to kind of do that. Can they choose how to do it?
Sure, I think so.
And postscript, do you tell them the options or do you make them come up with it? So if I'm playing a charisma-based guy and I know I could fight my way through the room or I can bluff my way through it, shouldn't I as the player, should it be my responsibility to say, like, to you as the DM, like, well, Brian, can I make 2 deception rolls to bluff my way through and use my disguise? Or should you as the DM provide them with kind of a mini menu for options for how to narratively skip over the next 4 rooms?
I think that's the tougher question, right? Because
Yeah.
I think when we look at 5th edition, like they really stress the 3 pillars of play. They stress social, combat, and exploration, and I think that's what we're talking about here, right? Like there's obviously the combat option, there's the social option, which is this charisma-based option, and then I would say that the exploration option is largely like the skill check approach, right? Or like there's some wizard combos you could throw at like silence and invisibility, and like mass invisibility, especially if we're talking about like mid to high level parties. Like that combination could essentially make up for heavy plate, right?
Okay. I'm going to throw this at you. Here's a scenario. You're a player, I'm a DM, you're in a group. I tell you that there's this keep, the Dread Keep. You know roughly where it is. You know that you're going to go there with a big group of people. What would you do before you even depart? How would you prep?
As a player,
Yeah.
I'd find some way to scout out like alternate entrances.
Okay. So there we go. As a player, you know, because you're an experienced player. Maybe newbie players wouldn't know that.
Sure.
So how, and I knew you were going to say that
Yeah.
because I would do the same thing
I
because
think
we're
that will
smart.
depend on how experienced
right?
your players are. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you go to the local, Bard's College, library, university, the temple. You do research and you have history checks and investigation checks, and you, based on that, you discover, oh, look, there's like an old partial map.
Right.
You're not giving away the whole cow.
Right.
But hey, it looks like if you go through this sewer entrance, you could bypass blah blah blah, and there's a sewer exit under the hill off here, right? So now, narratively, you've just skipped having to infiltrate a big keep. So now you're in the lower lung. You kind of skip through there. That's one way to do it, and that's an intelligence-based thing, right? Like history and arcane. Maybe they make an arcana check.
I think this, like the hard books that have been coming out for 5th edition, back up that notion, right?
Okay, give me an example.
So like
I'm not as
my
well-versed.
players tonight,
Yeah.
they're doing the last chapter of Rise of Tiamat. And
Spoilers.
Well, they know.
Okay, bye.
They can get some sweet tips if they're watching. They're not watching.
Yeah.
But it's like they've taken captive 2 of like the major players in the cult, so like they can interrogate those cult members and get basically a layout of the map of the temple of Tiamat, just like that, with alternate entrances and everything else. If they went out and scouted around ahead of time, they could get the secret entrance in that bypasses like half of the battles. Like there's a lot to it, and it's not like that's the most pressing example in my head because it's the one I prepped yesterday, right?
Yeah.
But it definitely happens in a lot of the books. Like the idea of like, and that's what I mean when I say like they're stressing exploration. They want you to find out the information, right? Like the books are full of information that if you just go in and like tank and spank your way through the chapters, you don't get the story, right?
Tank and spank your way through the chapters, Brian.
It's an old WoW term.
That just made my entire Christmas.
I'm glad. I'm glad it made
I'm
it
using tank and spank in high school because you know what that'll elicit, don't you? All right, Brian,
a conversation with the dean.
Yes. So one thing that you pointed out that I find interesting is that this is being published, right, as material that I think in the past, in old modules and stuff, they wouldn't have necessarily made that a published and suggested option because the mechanics didn't exist. First edition didn't have persuasion, deception.
Persuasion,
I mean, maybe the DM would have been like, "We'll make a charisma roll."
Yeah.
All right. Tangent. Let's go into something. How does interrogation work in your tabletop role-playing games? Because I think when people think of the word interrogate, they think of like torture and like waterboarding. How can you use the 3 social skills in D&D, for example, to interrogate? So, persuasion. Brian, you have captured one of the cultists.
Yeah.
How would you use persuasion to get the information you need?
So, I mean, the cult is pretty evil, so I might use a persuasion check to be like, hey, like, we want to give you a way out of this situation. Like, if we let you go, the cult's going to assume you gave us this information anyway. and it'll be dangerous for you. Like, we can offer you protection,
Which is truthful,
Right.
which makes it persuasion
Right.
and not deception.
we can offer you a degree of protection in exchange for information.
Being friendly and supportive and helpful, which is also persuasion.
I mean, that's
good. That's good.
I would go into detail on that further, I think, but
Okay.
like, largely, like, that's the rough cuts, right?
So
And then
basically
if that carrot
making a
doesn't
deal.
work, right? If
Right.
that carrot doesn't work, you bring out the stick with an intimidation roll or a deception roll.
There we go. The intimidation roll, I think, is mostly what more people would figure as the interrogation technique, you know, the torture. But it doesn't have to be physical torture. Like, you don't have to cut people's toes and fingers off. You can just
yell.
intimidate them. Yeah. There's also good cop, bad cop, right? So you have
Yeah,
one.
and I think that's largely what we're talking about.
Right,
here,
one party member try to make a good deal and be like, you know, let me talk to the rest of them.
Right.
And then he leaves. And then you got the big mean guy
Right.
with the high intimidation.
And
the
I think,
last
like,
one.
and I think from a DM's perspective, if you like play that out and do that two-step approach, maybe that's an advantage roll on the intimidation
Yes.
check. Like, maybe that there's a reason to reward players there.
Did you hear that? Newbie DMs, that's a huge tip. If your party's smart enough to good cop, bad cop somebody, reward them. Give them a little bit of a bonus there. Give them a little, throw them a bone and let them get some kind of benefit from working together as a party and using their skills tactically as a party, Okay, Brian. Let's use deception now. So now, same scenario, you've captured the cultist, but nobody's good at persuasion or intimidation, but somebody's hella good at deception. How do you use deception to interrogate them?
I mean, I think it's similar to a persuasion roll.
Yeah.
Right? But
Yeah.
instead of like the cult will kill you, it's like I'll like, and this is a little bit easier in like a modern game than like a fantasy game, but like
Yeah.
I'll scrub the record, right?
Right.
While I'm in there, I'll erase the camera footage or whatever, you know what I mean? That kind of thing.
I would say something like, we have contacts way up in the cult.
Right.
Tell us what we need to know, and we'll make sure that you're cleared.
Right.
That's a lie. We don't know anyone
No
in the
one.
cult.
Yeah.
Or
you're the person we know in the
Yeah.
cult.
or some other kind of bluff, some other kind of deception, some other kind of lie to elicit the response that you need. So good. All right, that was just a little side tangent. Let's get back to running the dungeon. So let's say you've got this narrative method
Sure.
where it's a little bit give and take. Maybe the DM provides some options or hints. And again, based, E. Hicks said this, and I think Danny said it. Thank you guys on Twitch. That, it depends on the experience level
Right.
of your players. It does, absolutely.
yeah.
Because if I was playing with you guys, like if I was
Right.
running something for my gaming weekend guys, or the handyman, or Bard's
not
Tale,
giving anything.
yeah, more
Yeah.
experienced players, the DM should not have to spoon feed
Right.
that. That's, those players should not be lazy.
Right.
They should be chomping at the bit to come up with ideas for how to research things, how to investigate things, how to,
Right.
get their way in without having to sludge through and fight and kill everything, right? But for newer groups, so if I'm running it for the high school students, or you're running it for one of the AL sessions, or maybe some newer players at the table, you can drop them little morsels and hints for using other skills, like you said, whether it's stealth, climbing, athletics, the charisma skills to subterfuge their way through, but some way or another to give them options to basically teach those new players, Brian. This is what I'm getting at. How can we teach players, new and old, to think outside of the box a little more? And that's one way, is by making a dungeon, or it doesn't have to be a dungeon, by making
An encounter.
an adventure, something that cannot simply be solved by rolling a dice and then rolling die and damage.
Right.
It's more than combat. And the exploration stuff lends itself to skill checks. But also, I think, too, that a lot of it is teaching them.
Yeah.
Because it's not intuitive necessarily for people to be like, oh, wait, I could, research and find
Right.
plans. What I always think of is in the Lord of the Rings movies, where Gandalf finally realizes that Bilbo's ring is the ring, and he's like, I got to split, and he rides his horse, and
Right.
he goes to Gondor, and he's in some ancient libraries, poring over texts, and he finds That's a perfect example
Right.
of investigation skill at work.
Right.
Like an extended check of research, and he finds out information, an old lore. You know,
Right.
yes, you could do that and just be like a history check.
Right.
Okay, you happen to know, but don't give away the whole thing. Maybe the history check is the starting point.
Right.
And you
Or
go,
maybe like
you remember hearing about this dread keep and that there
Yeah.
were several sieges and it was, you know, so
it
you
was
can check.
weakened on the southern wall.
Right,
or-
and that leads to going to the temple or the library or the college and investigating more.
I also think like allow your players to use their backgrounds and skills, right? So like from my perspective, I get a little bit bored when players, especially experienced players, are like, "Oh, I roll an investigation check for that information."
In the
Right.
sense of what?
In the sense of like,
Because
I
they're
want to
being lazy?
know what you're doing, right? Like, tell me how you're investigating. Tell me how you're searching for traps.
So
Are
you were
pulling a
literally
rug up?
saying the narrative. In other words, you're saying that you wanted them to describe
Right.
not just what they're doing, but how they're doing
Right.
it. Okay.
And the reward for that, like if somebody's like, "Oh, I pull the rug up and I pull the portraits off the wall, looking for like secret doors and safes and things
Versus
like
just
that."
I'm
Versus,
a
like,
roll
I'm gonna
investigation.
roll. Like if
Right.
you roll an investigation check, I'm getting to the point where if you're like, I want to make an investigation, especially for experienced players, if they just tell me like, I want to investigate check,
It's lazy.
I'll be like, all right, disadvantage.
Yeah.
Like if you don't tell me what you're doing
And
you
how you're
rolling
doing
a
it.
die.
Okay, why is that important, people? Let's address that.
Sure.
Why is it important for the players? Well, for one, they have to contribute to the narrative. This is an interactive storytelling experience. We've said this over and over,
Yeah.
right, Brian? It's not just the DM reading flavor text.
Right.
If that's all it is, just go get a choose your own adventure book. Like this is an interactive storytelling experience. So as a player, it's incumbent on you to describe what your character is doing. And what he's saying, I agree with. The more description you provide,
Right.
the more you should be rewarded.
Right.
If you describe how you're doing the thing, whatever the thing is, and then you roll, even if you don't get advantage for it, you roll. I sometimes think about the difficulty, the DC for the check, and I think to what extent do they exceed that DC? I might actually give them more information than I was originally going to give them because
Right.
they described it so well. Right?
And I think like we can harken back to like the handyman campaign, right?
Yeah.
Where Ron like is a tradesman and knows trade
Yeah.
routes. So like when he rolls a history check,
Yeah.
he's rolling a history check specifically on trade about the thing he's asking about.
Right.
Like,
Now, and that's something where we can, you know, it's hard because God, I wish we were shooting video of those old days.
yeah.
I'll say this though. So that is a combination of multiple things. Number one,
Right.
it's a combination of you on the player perspective,
Making choices for the
making
character.
choices for the character, being descriptive, sticking with who that character is and how that character would operate or how that character would know things
and interpret the world.
and interpret the world, that character's perspective.
Yeah.
That's good role playing. Number two, me as a DM, even if I didn't prep for it. So
Right.
DMs, even if you don't prep for something, you have to think about your table. You have to figure out what each one of these people would reasonably know based on the character that that person made and what that player is doing. And you have to be responsive to it.
And this
a
is why
big-
drop-ins are often more challenging to run than long-form campaigns, and why they often devolve into that tank and spank mindset is because the DMs don't know the characters as well.
Yeah.
And they honestly don't have time to learn the characters.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why, like, as much as I love AL and I love, like, running it and it's accessible and it grows the community, there are things about it that limit it in terms of the ability to tell good stories. And that is one of them. Is like when you're working with the same group, every time you sit down, you have more opportunity to learn those. From a DM's perspective, you have more opportunity to learn those characters, learn what their motivations are, and learn where their backgrounds are, and adjust accordingly.
Yep, that's a huge. It is the job of the people at the table to do all those things. And you know, here just to go back for a second, when I'm thinking of Xander and playing with moms and stuff, I think when people who don't know games, tabletop games and role playing games, and don't understand quite how it works, they don't get how much of a commitment it can be if you want to have a quote-unquote serious game.
Right.
It's easy to get a bunch of people together
For a
and do a
one-nighter or
dungeon
a
crawl
one-shot or
and
whatever.
roll through stuff and, I have fun. But if you want to build a long-term narrative, a lot of the people who watch shows that are part of the community, who support the community by watching shows, who support, and patronize those shows, and they're contributing in their own way as well. And I think that it's because, for whatever show you support, they see, oh wow, this is like a movie, this is like a TV show, this is an ongoing thing, and it's different in a sense because there's no master, one thing that tells the story. It's a group.
Right.
It's the DM setting the world and being responsive. It's the players being invested.
Right.
And really giving a shit about what they're doing and why they're doing it and
And
how
that's
their
killer.
character
I think
would see it.
so often the responsibility of the narrative gets pushed onto the DM.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be.
And it really, a DM is at the table. And that's why, when we launched a new show on Saturday, we launched it in a different system, right? Is because we're trying to, explore other systems, one, but two, Monster of the Week is a much more narrative-focused system where everyone gets involved.
Yeah.
By the book, right?
Right.
Everyone in the book inherently, part of character creation is telling other characters things about them, right? I'm the way I relate to your character is that I saved you from this encounter one time because orcs attacked you on the way from the bar to your farm.
Yeah.
Right? That's a real thing that came up on Saturday because the system doesn't just allow for it, but necessitates it. Right?
This brings back the ongoing and recurring topic of system and mechanics versus narrative. What impacts? There's a weave, right? There's always some kind of it's a circle. There's always a balance.
Welcome back,
Sometimes the
Spec Ops.
percentages are back and forth, right? Like when I think of Danny's Invisible Sun thing, that's very much like what you're talking about, where the initial narrative, the character creation, determines a huge part
of
right?
where the game goes.
And not all games are like that.
No.
And you know what? To be fair, not everybody wants that, and that's fine. We're not saying that
Right.
what we're saying is the only way to play. We're saying there are options. There are ways to expand your narrative. But if you're not down with that, if you and your group of people have fun just dungeon crawling, that's what you do,
Yeah.
But there are ways to do it, and I think we've touched on a lot of those ways.
I think so.
Brian, it is time towards the end of the show for Monster Monday.
Monster Monday.
Brian,
That's what I find intriguing about Tales from the Loop. It's set up in such a way that lets the players narrate the story more than the GM does. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with Tales from the Loop. I've seen a couple of streams. My buddy Josh is on one with Roll20. But if that's what the system does, I'm thrilled to hear it. I think as we explore new systems, we really need to focus on other ways to tell stories. So I think that's great. Monster Monday.
So today we are going to let David Carafa, he is the wizard behind the curtain, who is in the control room running the show right now. We are going to let him choose which book we are going to consult.
Okay.
So Dave, pick a number between 1, 2, or 3, and that will determine the book.
2.
Dave says 2. 1, 2. Looks like we're doing Volo's Guide.
Volo's Guide.
All right, Volo's Guide. Now, Volo's Guide's a little different from your standard monster manual, Brian,
Right.
insofar as...
You have to get through the chapters before you can get to the monsters.
That's right. So we will find a page start number. And then the first person to answer in the live Twitch stream will give us the monster from Volo's Guide, for which we will create a imagined scenario for you to use in your gaming table.
So the minimum page is 122,
Minimum page is 122.
and the highest is 220.
Between 122 and 220. Go. First person on the chat who responds gets our love, because we don't have anything to give away. Merry Christmas. Dun, 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 dun. 150.
150.
E. Hicks is the winner. 150, Brian. Oh, by the way, so just as an aside, at Gaming Weekend, I finally got to use an Otiuff. You know those
Garbage monster?
Yeah, the garbage monster. Brian, I've loved that monster. I haven't used it since first edition.
Really?
That's the last time. So I finally had a legitimate reason, because they basically went down a poop chute, and it was awesome. They killed it right away, but it was still so fun.
CR3
I grappled two dwarves and I smashed them together with the tentacles.
You Superman their heads.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right, what do we got, Brian?
We have storm giants, one way or the other. Either
my
a
God.
Dreamwalker or a Quintessent.
I don't even know what that is, so we need to do a little descriptive reading.
I suppose we could...
To forestall the inevitable, some storm giants approaching the end of their natural lifespans seek an escape from death. They plumb the depths of the powerful connection to the elements and disperse themselves into nature, literally transforming into semi-conscious storms. Oh my God. This is so high level. It is so much more powerful than what I'm...
CR16. Yeah, that's legit.
Jeez. CR16, yikes. Talk about high level.
And then...
What's the other one?
The other one,
Stone Giant Dreamwalker. The surface of the world. Read that one, Brian.
Surface of the world is an alien realm to storm giants, fluctuating
Stone Giants. Stone Giant Dream.
Yeah. Fluctuating, temporally exposed to gusting wind and sudden rain. It is as wildly changeable as a dream, and that's how they regard it, as a dream. Nothing here is permanent, nothing here is real. What happens on the surface doesn't matter. Promises and bargains made here don't need be honored. Life and even art holds less value here. That's interesting. Which one do you want?
God, this is a challenge, dude.
This is tough.
This is tough.
You're really making us earn our not money here.
I'll let you pick, but as I'm looking these over, I am not having my usual stream of ideas. I gotta get in the zone for this. Dreamwalker or Quintessent. Both of these are very... This seems
they're
extremely
like
rare.
specialized giants, right? So
yeah,
that's part of what they did.
Okay, all right. We got to do it.
Yeah,
this is what we do. So you pick.
I'm gonna do Quintessent, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. So
all right. So I'm gonna think about these stats. Dreamwalker. Petrifying touch. The giant touch. Yikes. Yeah, these are pretty tough dudes. Challenge rating 10, and then what's yours?
16.
16. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Okay. Yikes.
All right, I'm ready. Kind of.
Charmed by the
I've got
giant.
the beginning of the idea.
Charmed by the giant.
I for a Storm Giant Quintessent, page 151 of the Bestiary, part of Volo's Guide. I think so. In Anathema, we have these giant elemental beasts that are plaguing the countryside. So I think a Storm Giant Quintessent is maybe the guardian of one of those portals, right? It would be the air portal, obviously. So in order to seal that rift, maybe. And this isn't something I'm going to use because giants are different in the setting, but it's one way you could do it. Is in order to seal the rift, you have to defeat this storm giant and go through some sort of ritual to seal off the rift. And I think there's probably a few steps before the final boss battle. At a CR16, you're probably okay to go into this fight party level 12-ish. And so I think you're going to deal with, it's probably going to be in the mountains. There's probably going to be some rocks, some air elementals, maybe some of the tougher air elementals from...
God, I just see this as a fearful encounter, man.
It won't all be one encounter.
Right.
So this will be the end of
whole,
the temple where this
would be a whole chapter.
So there's a big essentially temple on this mountaintop. The door to the temple is protected by a pair of rocks.
Oh my God.
It's level 16, man.
Yeah.
You get I think rocks are CR8, so maybe you're okay there. You get past the rocks. You deal with some like lower level storm giants and some air elementals. You get past them through like.
Brian, could I just make a climb check to narratively bypass all that?
You can make a charisma check to persuade them that they're on the wrong side of this.
All right, fair enough.
And then you get to the storm giant Quintessent, who has probably been corrupted in some way by the energy of the airplane, and is like dedicated to the cause. So this means like the notion of like charisma checks, the DC is going to be high and at disadvantage to persuade her to like step aside. But I think largely that's what I'm doing. It's a lot of lightning damage, and this is all stuff, right? Like this is stuff that if the players do research, they can get around the toughest aspects of. Like lightning resistance is going to get you through the lion's share of a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So you do some research, and all of a sudden you've got a lot of information that like you can use to help out these fights.
I think it's a fantastic build. I don't have as awesome of a build because I'm not familiar with this, but here's what I'm going to go through the thought process, because I don't really have a great idea, but I'm going to go through what I'm thinking. So Stone Giant Dreamwalker. Stone Giant
I guess
Dreamwalkers.
the givens here are that stone giants are predominantly subterranean, right? But this is a special case.
Right. And they go on dream quests in the surface world, seeking inspiration for their art to break decades-long ennui, or out of simple curiosity. Mad wanderers. Dreamwalkers are driven mad by isolation, shame, and their unendingly alien surroundings, and this madness leaches out into the world around them, affecting other creatures. So, anything with dream and scary things, Brian, automatically clicks Cthulhu for me. So, but we're playing D&D. Here's where I'm going with this. The party is on their way through, and this is obviously like higher level, right? Because what are these guys? CR10. Okay.
So like 7 and above.
Yeah, 5 to 7. All right. They're on their way through an area that they don't know too well. That's actually part of the campaign. They're going through an area, and maybe this is an area where, like, normally you just narratively skip through, right? Like, okay, you guys travel for 3 days. Or you'd play it as like, okay, make a random roll, right? And then, okay, a party of goblins or bandits attack you or something, right? Random encounter. Instead of the random encounter, you build this little micro quest into the fix, okay? So they break for camp in this unknown area. And whoever's on watch, you have them make their usual perception roll, right? So the players think that this is just some, like, you know, the ordinary camp thing. Oh, we're going to get attacked at night. But instead what you do is you create like a dream situation. You don't tell the player or players who are on watch that this is a dream. So that you basically say that they see this like glowing off in the distance. They wake everybody else up. Everybody's all in the dream together. Okay? So they're not actually awake. They're still dreaming. They go through, they follow this mysterious thing, these sounds, these visions. They're wary, they're cautious, and it leads them through this like little maze of rocks and stuff. But then as they move through it, they notice that the rocks are not just normal boulders and rocks and cliff faces, that it's like actually statues and art, like abstract weird carvings and stuff. And it's just a little more mysterious. And then finally it leads them to a campfire where they see this stone giant dreamwalker sitting around the campfire. And it's almost like, imagine like a shaman. Like they find this shaman on a dream quest. And the stone giant dreamwalker tells them that like to get through, to awaken from this dreamland, that they have to like find this missing piece that he can't find. That he can't finish what he's doing without the cobalt. And the cobalt javelin is basically his final tool for his art. So they have to go back through the maze and find the cobalt javelin. And the cobalt javelin is something that's constantly eluding them until they make enough wisdom saves over whatever you decide for them to finally find the cobalt javelin. And then they bring it back to the stone giant dreamwalker. Except the fact is the stone giant dreamwalker doesn't keep his promises. And this whole time you have them make these DC 13 charisma saves, right? And he's constantly trying to charm them into doing different stuff, because really what it comes down to is he's lonely and he just wants to keep them with him for
That's awesome.
forever.
I like this as like a regularly occurring character, right?
Yeah.
Almost like a trickster spirit from like the good seasons of Supernatural.
Yeah. But like maybe it is the kind of thing where, you know, it is a recurring thing, and they don't realize that he's just lonely and he wants to keep them around. And then you never know. Maybe the players are like, you will let us go or we're going to kill you. And then, you know, maybe they do fight him and they wake from the dream. But I think there's a way to make that a little micro encounter or a recurring thing. Or, you know, you could build it into the campaign lore. Maybe it's not the Cobalt Javelin. Maybe he's having them find a series of things in these dream encounters that he needs. And once they've collected all 6 of them, he'll actually reward them. Yeah. You know, if they collaborate.
I like it.
Yeah. So that's all.
That's
Monster Monday. So people, thank you for tuning in. All of y'all are good people. DoD Spec Ops, EHICS, Danny, of course. Thanks
Active
for tuning
chat
in
today. It was exciting. Yeah.
And you know, we're gonna take a break because the school will be on winter break, and Brian's gonna be up in the
greatish whitish
northish. So you all have a wonderful holiday break if you get a break, and if you don't get a break, enjoy the time that you do have with friends and family. Hopefully you'll get some time to do a little bit of tabletop fun or indulge yourself in other nerddom.
If you're looking for stuff to do, you can always binge 2.5 seasons of The Bard's Tale.
Yes.
That's a thing you could do.
People, I'm telling you, this season 3 is heating up. Get caught up if you're not already. Go over to the InitiativeCoffeeCo YouTube channel and make sure that you get caught up, because there's going to be an episode every Friday, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, all the way into January. Yeah. And
I'll tell you,
it's getting narratively very interesting.
It's season 3, and I'm just now prepping the first dungeon in this Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
Yes. Yes. So thanks for tuning in. Find us on all the social media. I know that you guys that are in the chat, thank you for your support. We really do appreciate it. And it makes the show a lot more fun
for us
when you guys are throwing questions and involved in the show. So thanks for supporting us, and have a great holiday. We'll see you in 2019.
Roll together.